We got the rest of our lives to be mediocre, but we have the opportunity to play like gods for the next half of football. But we can't be afraid to lose. There's no room for fear in this game.
This is the New Hampshire High School Football Show.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
The New Hampshire High School Football Show is brought to you by New Hampshire State Liquor Commission's Division of Enforcement.
I don't want them to gain another yard.
You blitz all night. If they cross the line of scrimmage, I'm going to take every last one of you out.
And now, here are your hosts, Pete Terrier.
And it's just disappointing that every time me and you go to the same game, it's blowout. We will not make that mistake again.
And Mark Thaler.
As far as I'm concerned, there's only one poll, and people can take shots at me if they want for that, but it's just imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
And I'll offer this up to you. Next time you actually make a trip out to Keene, if you want to come next Friday to see Bedford Keene, I'll buy you dinner.
Coach, don't worry. I'm coming out to see you next week. Winnicott, Keene. Good morning, another edition of the New Hampshire High School Football Show on WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave. You can also catch the video cast of the program online nhsportspage.com. Pete Terrier along with Mark Thaler, and we might have to change up that intro because I said anytime me and you go to the same game, Mark, blowout city. Certainly not the case last night at Gill Stadium. We'll talk about that as we get around the league. All the scores, 15 games last night, full schedule. Why don't we get right to it, Mark? The Friday night scoreboard brought to you by the New Hampshire Liquor Commission's Division of Enforcement and the Buyers Beware program, reminding all adults it's against the law to provide alcohol to minors, even on a long Columbus Day weekend, Mark.
Yeah, good morning, Pete. Like you said, a number of big games last night. We'll start Division 1. Probably the game of the night. Two of the teams in the top 10 for the power poll. Number 8, Nashua South with a shocker over Manchester Central just because of the way it ended more than anything. Number 5 Central, that is. Final score 35-28. Quarterback Trevor Knight runs 71 yards in the final seconds to avoid overtime and give South probably a season-saving win. I know we'll talk about that, but that was a season saver. Knight finished with 133 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. He also threw for 136 and a score. Riley Cody, Central's quarterback, had a nice game. He threw for 3 touchdowns. But back to Nashua South, Daimir Hyde also chipped in big, 137 rushing yards and a touchdown. So Nashua South, again, probably saving its season at least through 6 weeks anyway. Big win for the Purple Panthers. Number 2, Exeter beat Salem 35-6, and Concord knocked off Londonderry 44-28. Tolbert, Nemo, and Robert Law each with 3 touchdowns for the Crimson Tide. In Division 2, Keene with a 1-point win over those pesky Dover Green Wave. I know they almost upset number 1 Winnicott last week, but the Blackbirds win last night 21-20. Timberlane from Plastow knocked off Merrimack 49-12. Josh David 139 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns. And speaking of number 1 Winnicott, they played another Seacoast rival, this time Spalding, and the Warriors won 34-20. In Division 3, Souhegan over Pembroke 40-13. Alvern by a touchdown over Conval 28-21. And Portsmouth knocked off Hollis Brookline 35-19. Dylan Crosby over 100 yards rushing for the Clippers. In Division 4, speaking of a team that can rush the football, Trinity with a 46-7 win over Kennett. 5 different runners scored touchdowns for the Pioneers. Those names: Brad Rhodes, Justin Johnson, Austin Chambers, Romeo Masuku, and Ryan Carrier. Again, 5 different guys reaching the end zone on the ground for the Trinity Pioneers. Plymouth continues to win, still unbeaten, 30-14 winners over Laconia, and Hanover with a 46-8 win over Kingswood. Quarterback Sean Cavallaro and receiver Cyrus Rothwell-Ferrars, each with 3 touchdowns for the Marauders. 2 games in Division 5, Kearsarge with a 49-13 win over Pelham, and Somersworth with a shutout win over Stevens 27-0. Josh Ream just shy of 200 rushing yards for the Hilltoppers. 1 non-league game last night, and this was also, at least to me, a big shocker because you know how I feel about Division 1 teams playing, really, obviously anybody from a lower division. Division 3 Milford with a 24-21 win over Division 1 Nashua North. Morgan Andrews, the star soccer standout, with the winning field goal with about 8+ minutes to play, 30-yarder for her. It was the difference. Final score 24-21.
Yeah, that's impressive. I saw that. I was watching Jamie Staten on Channel 9, the Friday Night Football show, and saw that she did that. My question about that one is, did Jason Roby play his starters? We both thought that he would because he had a young team, and they really, although they weren't eliminated from playoff contention in Division I, they really weren't in the playoff hunt, so to speak. So we wonder if they went full bore all out last night in that game, and I'm sure we can find out about that as the show goes along. But the thing that I want to talk about, I want to start with the Nashua South win. You mentioned Trevor Knight's heroics in the final seconds. Looked like that thing was headed to overtime, and I made my first Twitter mistake. I'm a newbie, all right? Is there a term for a new Twitter person?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
I made my first Twitter mistake. It's late, final half a minute, and I go, OT, baby. I tweeted out there.
Ouch.
Obviously premature. That was more of a reactionary thing. I wasn't reporting necessarily on the game. I was more commenting on the game on Twitter. I leave that reporting stuff to guys like you, Mark Thaler. So I put out there, OT, baby. What do you know? Out of the timeout, there goes Trevor Knight, 71-yard for a score. No OT.
No OT.
Unless Central miraculously comes back, which didn't happen.
Right.
But my first Twitter mistake.
It's okay.
That's not a big deal?
Well, I mean, no.
You can say it is.
It is what it is, yeah.
I didn't think it was a big deal.
No,
Don't take me seriously. That's all I'm going to say. That's my caveat. Do not take me seriously on Twitter.
It's okay.
I don't think anybody does anyway. I only have like 10 followers.
You'll build the following.
If a tree falls in the woods and nobody hears it, does it make a sound? No one heard me with my tweet on OT, baby. But what a game last night.
Something else. Yeah. Trevor Knight, he's really rebounded from a couple weeks ago when he was him and his teammates were at Concord in that 20-3 loss, and they, after a 13-play drive to start the game that stalled and ended in a field goal, I don't think they crossed the 50 the rest of the game against Concord. They were really out of sorts that day. They had trouble with the blitz from Concord. I remember Concord head coach Eric Brown telling us after the game that the game plan that day was in a single word, pressure, and they got it. But South has responded nicely the last couple of weeks. They beat Nashua North last week, which I've taken I've taken some heat for maybe ranking Nashua South a little high in my personal on my ballot because they quote unquote only beat Nashua North, which is a team that seems like it's struggling a little bit this year. But last night I think put all those questions to rest. They went into Manchester in a highly ranked team and took Central's best shots because Central didn't go away. They certainly didn't go quietly, and then to win it in the end like that. They saved their season probably. Again, for the time being. Now, they still have a lot of work to do because they obviously they have Exeter and Pinkerton still on the schedule. Those are monster games. And if I'm not mistaken, Exeter is next week.
It is. It's at Exeter next week. Yeah,
that's a big one. So they still have a lot of work to do. But those games might have been, I don't want to say meaningless or pointless, but they wouldn't have had the same meaning anyway had they lost last night, because then they would have been 0-2 against the quote-unquote playoff competition. They would have been 0-2 against Concord and obviously Central with 2 games against the 2 of the state's top teams coming up, and that might have been lights out for playoff chances for the Purple Panthers. But that changes now because of last night.
So now Central has 2 losses in Division I.
Yep.
Coach Ryan Ray last night after the game kind of lamenting that fact. Look, we got 2 losses in the division in the middle of the season. That's not good, especially when you still got to play Pinkerton later on in the season, although Central has played Pinkerton tough lately. Yep. Now you got Concord and Nashua South staring at one of those head-to-head ties potentially with the tiebreakers. I don't want to get into the tie. I saw Roger Brown last night with a tweet, and I love you, Raj, but he throws out there that, hey, we could be having a 3-way tie for that final playoff spot. It's actually for the final 2 playoff spots because you got to figure Pinkerton, Exeter in, and then there's 3 teams really fighting it out for 2 spots.
Right, and I agree with you. It's still very, very early to be talking tiebreakers and head-to-head wins as it relates to the playoffs. All that said, I will just throw this out there real quickly. We're 6 weeks in, and now those 3 teams that are fighting for realistically 2 spots, again, Concord, Central, and South, they're all 1-1 in head-to-head play.
Mm-hmm. And that's the problem.
Well, right, and there's still obviously plenty of games to go, and so that head-to-head tie is only going to matter if they all finish the season with the exact same league record. So there is still a lot of football left before we get to that point. But it's interesting that 6 weeks in, these 3 teams are getting, people are talking about them a lot as it relates to the playoffs, and they're all 1-1 against each other. So we'll see how the rest of the regular season shakes out, because these games will obviously now they are much more important because these teams have been beating each other up.
We've got Scott Knight from Nashua South. He's going to join us in about 20, 25 minutes or so, coming up later this hour. Also, Dover, I know that we think they're good. They've played a real tough strength of schedule so far this year, but they keep coming up on the short end of these scores. Lose another squeaker last night against Keene, a tough one at Keene. We will talk with John Doyle from Fosters.com, who covers that team on a regular basis. Did not make the trip across 101 last night out to Keene, was manning the desk at the Fosters Daily Democrat, Fosters.com. But we'll talk to him about that game, that team, and what someone wants to do to football in the town of Dover, which caused a lot of waves in Green Wave country this past week. Should they ban football because of concussions and head injuries and things like that? I don't think that's going to happen, but it made for an interesting news cycle this week. We'll talk to John Doyle, try and see what he can get out of that, what the feeling is in that community. I think we're all safe to say that we don't want that to happen. I mean, heck, we host a show called the New Hampshire High School Football Show. So if they ban football, that's bad for us. Yeah. And I think bad for the state of New Hampshire and just bad for football community. So we'll take a timeout, come back with John Doyle, talk to him about that story and some Seacoast football. Lots of exciting games going on. There's still some games left to play today. It is the New Hampshire High School Football Show. Pete Terrier, along with Mark Thaler from the Union Leader. We got John Kesty from Sportspage. He's in here filming this thing as he always does each and every week. Kayla Windsor, our producer, is back. We haven't seen her in about
welcome back.
We haven't seen her in about a year or so. I think it was like season opening weekend. She was here, but she's checked out, moving on to bigger and better things. But she's back with us today. We'll take a quick time out, come back with John Doyle. Don't forget Scott Knight coming up later this hour to talk about his son's game-winning 71-yard touchdown run against Manchester Central, and then Jimmy Lozon, the head coach of the Manchester West Blue Knights. They got a rivalry game at Bedford this afternoon. That should be interesting. We'll talk to Coach Lawson coming up a little bit, about an hour from now at 8:20 or so. It is the New Hampshire High School Football Show, WGIR, AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
Welcome back to the best local coverage of New Hampshire high school football on the New Hampshire High School Football Show on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Welcome back to another edition of the New Hampshire High School Football Show. I am Pete Terrier, Mark Thaler from the Union Leader, New Hampshire Sunday News, and NewHampshireGameDay.com is our regular co-host here, and we talk about all things New Hampshire High School football, mostly on the field stuff, Mark, but every once in a while a story comes up that you just have to talk about on a Saturday morning, and we're bringing in one of the experts, especially on the Seacoast, John Doyle from Foster's Daily Democrat and Fosters.com. He loves these early Saturday morning wake-up calls, don't you, John?
Hey, well, my kid's got a soccer game at 9 a.m., so I really don't mind.
All right,
in my morning on the radio with you guys.
Well, you don't do any coverage of those kids' soccer games, or you wait until they get to a certain age before you start putting them in the paper or putting them online?
I mean, I don't know about that, but it's my favorite sporting event of the year, needless to say, of the week.
Well, do we have to worry about the future of football in Dover? Because I know that one of the school board members brought it up, Dr. Paul Butler, at the meeting earlier this week and said, you know what, maybe we should shut down football here because I'm really worried about our kids' health going forward with all the concussions and things like that are happening. Well,
gentlemen, I'm here to report that football isn't going anywhere here in Dover. You heard it here first. What basically happened was, I mean, you explained it pretty well. One member of the school board at the end of Monday night's meeting, during a period of, at the end of the meeting, which is usually reserved for things like birthday announcements, sort of laid this bombshell and proposed cutting football at the Dover High School. And he is a former physician, and he made this proposition because he believes that there are just too many injuries in football and that it's only a matter of time before lawsuits inevitably force the district and other districts to eventually ban the sport. In the research that I've done in the last week, it seems it's as much controversy as this has caused, it does not appear to have much support on the school board. And should this ever come to a vote, you have to be, it's fairly certain that this would be met with significant opposition. So the idea that Dover is actually considering dropping football is probably very far-fetched at this point, but it did sort of create the perception, because of this one school board member, that Dover is at the crossroads of the national debate on football, and that just is not really the case.
Yeah, John, what was the reaction amongst coaches, players, people really tied into the program once this news came out this week? Was it more shock that somebody proposed this, or was it frustration that, we have to deal with this because honestly we're not football isn't going anywhere? I mean, did you get a sense for what the overall feeling was amongst people tied into the football program?
It was very interesting. I think if this had come up 10 years ago, you would have heard probably a lot more, what is he talking about? It's football. Kids are going to get injured. Kids are going to get their bell rung. Kids need to be tough. Everybody I talked to, and I talked to mostly coaches and ADs from around the area. I also talked with some concussion experts at UNH. They were very sensitive to the issue of concussions. As we all know, it's become a huge national story in the past year, 2 years. And people are very sensitive to this issue. So a lot of people said, look, we understand that football is a dangerous sport, and we understand that these concerns are legitimate that this doctor and many members of the community have. Now, banning football is not the answer, was fairly unanimous. It's sort of like, killing a fly with a sledgehammer to take that drastic measure. But, these are things that we need to be concerned with. So I thought that was interesting. I think, maybe even 5 years ago, if this had come up, you would have heard a lot more dismissive attitudes towards it. But the people I talked to, again, they don't want to ban football. They don't think that that's the actual answer, but they're very sensitive to the whole issue of concussions because it's, and we've all stood in the sidelines of high school football games, and we've all seen these games up close, maybe more than the average fan, being reporters. And some of these hits, they're crazy. And I look at them, and at least once a game, I'm looking at some of these hits and just sort of cringing myself. It's how could people go through this brutality? But it is football, and that is the price you pay to play it.
That's John Doyle from Fosters.com. The Fosters Daily Democrat covers the Seacoast teams, focus on Dover and Spalding and St. Thomas, those teams out there in that neck of the woods. You can hear us on 96.7 The Wave around there. How's that FM signal? Just booms out there. It's great to hear some
You guys boom. Your voice booms over the Seacoast. Washington, clear as a bell. Great.
Well, I'll tell you what, John, this topic is apropos. I mean, last night, Mark, we're talking with Coach Scott Knight after the game, and he's talking about how he has kids, out with concussions. They're just coming back with concussions, and the timing is real good because you don't even know about this yet, Mark. I booked a guest next week from St. Joseph's Hospital, Sue Barnard. She's going to join us in studio on the program to talk about this very subject. They've got some testing sessions. You've heard of the impact testing, sure. What they do, preseason stuff, and they do that baseline test, and then if you have a situation, a head injury during the season, you go back and retake the test and see if your levels match up to where they were before the season, and then you're cleared to play once those levels get back there. Well, Sue Barnard's going to come in. I'm actually going to St. Joe's next Tuesday. I'm going to take this test personally. Okay. All right. And I'm going to have my baseline test. And then I'm going to let you and maybe John and Kayla rough me up in studio. And then I'm going to go back in and take another test after that to see where I stand. Or maybe I'll just wrestle with my two young boys. Who knows? But not to make light of the whole situation, but she's going to be in here next week talking about that. St. Joe's is doing a series of clinics where you can go in and bring your whole team, whatever youth organization, have them do this. Ideally, you want to do it in the beginning of the season before it starts, but it's just so top of mind right now that I think it is a problem. But like you said, John, I don't think that canceling football is the problem. I think the best way to handle this situation is education. And 5 years ago, we weren't talking about this, and it was kind of like, get back out there. This is football. You're tough. I mean, that has changed the most. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Well, one of the interesting things that the doctor brought up was the lawsuits. Is that lawsuits is eventually going to force school districts to drop football. But if you look at why this is a national story in the NFL, it's because for years, decades really, when you think about it, the coaches were and because it was such a money-driven enterprise, throwing guys back in there with throwing caution to the wind and saying, hey, you just got your bell rung. It's football. Get back in there. I don't think that high schools and colleges are going to be facing the same problem years down the road because, I think that high schools, especially here in New Hampshire, have been very proactive in mitigating the effects of concussions. There was just a law passed in August, not just for football, but for every sport, that they have to take extreme caution when caring for concussions. They have to get parental consent for the player to go back in. You know, they have to sit out a certain amount of time. And I think the reason for that is because high school football is not as money-driven as the NFL and big-time colleges. So, you know, lawsuits, I mean, that really is the big thing right now. It's how are we going to save our sport? How are we going to preserve football? One of the things is to err on the side of extreme caution when it comes to concussion and head injuries, to make sure we, do everything we can and make a good faith effort, really, to make sure these kids are protected.
Yeah, John, I would agree with you completely on what you just said. I mean, I gave Pinkerton coach Brian O'Reilly a call this week for a story in the Union Leader, just kind of getting a response to what Paul Butler had said, or his motion with regard to Dover football, and Coach O'Reilly really said many of the same things that John just said on the air here, that in the last few years, and that you said as well, Pete, nowadays they've done a complete 180 in terms of how they approach this and how they treat any kind of hint of head trauma. So it certainly does seem that football's not going anywhere, and that many of the schools are extremely cautious in dealing with high school athletes. So it seems like
they really have no choice.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Hey, John, let's go on the field right now. Let's talk about this Dover football team. I know you weren't at the game last night. Were you disappointed when they didn't assign you the trip out to Keene, first of all?
Keene trips, I'll tell you what, those are tough, man. You know, tough to justify, for midseason. But Sean Sear of the Keene Sentinel provided me updates all night, so we were able to get a nice little brief package in the paper this morning. So thanks to Sean for that. Followed him all night on Twitter. Yeah, what are you going to do? Dover, 2 weeks in a row now. They've come down from, two touchdowns down to top teams. They did it with Winnicott to force overtime last week in the fourth quarter. Did it again against Keene, although I guess a missed extra point was the difference last night. So really a really heartbreaking season for Dover. They're 1-5 now, with a couple of those losses being very close. Interestingly enough, though, they could still make the playoffs. They could win out. I think they have a good chance against Bedford next week. You never know what could happen there. And then they have 3 games that they should win: Timberlane, West, and Merrimack. I don't know if they're in that order. They could very well finish 4-4, and then that might, with some help, sneak them into the playoffs. The most amazing thing about Dover this year, though, is the fact that I haven't seen any reports from last night as far as injuries go, but the fact that team has stayed intact. I mean, they were paper thin coming into this season. 35 players, I think they had max on their roster at one point. Numbers really an issue at Dover, and the fact that they've come through without any major injuries. Obviously, they're dinged a little bit, as any team would be after 6 weeks, but I think that's really remarkable. So success this season is probably going to have to be measured not in terms of wins and losses with Dover, but that's sports,
And I think, and I didn't read it, I just read the headline on Fosters.com about how you say Dover's getting into the playoffs. Would you care to retract that story?
No,
this morning?
well, I don't know. I mean,
Or you're sticking to it?
That the only time I've seen Keene this year was last week in that typhoon at Spalding, and they won 6-0. And I said, I think this is a team that Dover can beat. And it turns out that, I was right as far as they were able to compete with them, and they did lose, but. I mean, yeah, it might be tough to say without a doubt that they are going to get in the playoffs, but I think they are poised for a comeback, very similar to the one that Spalding had last year when they won their last 4 Division II games to sneak into the playoffs with 4-4. And you never know, the same thing could happen. The schedule certainly favors them. They have 3 games on there that they definitely should win, and if they can pull off a win at Bedford, if they pull off an upset of Bedford next week, I think they'd finish 5-3 in the division. That would almost certainly put them into the 4th spot. So,
well, we'll see if you're right, Sean. We'll see if you're right. Appreciate the time here on a Saturday morning.
Right, guys.
Hey, we'll be out
Thank
there
you.
to provide full coverage of that soccer game at 9 o'clock.
Well, isn't that a conflict of interest, though, when it's your own kid?
Yeah. No, I'm saying me and Mark will be out there.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
We'll be there.
Yeah, no, that'd be great, man. I'll be
Mark
on the
just
corner of the
volunteered.
field, big, huge cup of coffee. I don't like to bother anyone when I go. I just like to watch.
Thanks, John.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, John Doyle, Foster's Daily Democrat, Fosters.com. Fear not, Dover football fans. Your program going nowhere.
No.
But I think the guy, look, he means well when he comes out with that, the Dover School Board member, Dr. Paul Butler. He means well, and maybe this is an attempt to increase the education process of the whole thing.
Yeah, he means
You
well,
know?
and he had a couple of good points from what I read and also saw on television. He was saying that it took a long time for people to get on board with the idea of quitting smoking or wearing bicycle helmets, and I think his term to Channel 9 was this is the first volley. So I think even he realized that he was putting it out. I mean, I don't want to speak for him, but my impression from what I read and heard from him is that he was putting it out there as that first attempt, get it out into the public consciousness and see what happens, because things such as this take a long time to develop, so you got to start somewhere.
All right, what didn't take a long time to develop was Trevor Knight's game-winning 71-yard touchdown run last night after I said the thing was going to overtime on Twitter, publicly embarrassing myself in front of my 34 followers. Hey, whatever. You make mistakes, okay? Yeah. We'll talk to the head coach and the dad of the player who scored that touchdown, Scott Knight from Nashua South, coming up next after these. The New Hampshire High School Football Show, WGIR, AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
These guys know their high school football. It's the New Hampshire High School Football Show with Pete Terrier and Mark Thaler on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Rolling up towards the top of the hour, 8 o'clock. Great first guest, John Doyle from Fosters.com, the Fosters Daily Democrat, talking to us about Nover football not going away. I know the concussions and things like that are a huge factor in high school sports. As a matter of fact, our next guest on the program, Scott Knight from Nashua South, was telling us last night how he had kids coming back from concussions, kids out with concussions. But I'm sure his head is quite clear this morning after an exciting 35-28 victory last night at Gill Stadium against Manchester Central. Good morning, Coach. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, how you doing, guys? Thanks for having me.
We're doing very well, and obviously this was a back-and-forth game throughout the course of the night. You guys really came out strong and took control of it, but Central will not go away, did not go away, and facing really a situation where you could have kneeled on the ball and played for overtime. You guys called timeout with about 25 seconds or so left and ran a play that was supposed to just get you 5 yards and maybe eventually 2 overtime, but it turned into a 71-yard touchdown run by your son and quarterback, Trevor Knight. Can you relive that play and how that went down and what was really supposed to happen?
I mean, it wasn't, it was, I mean, we called timeout and just to kind of gather the kids. I mean, we called timeout, number one, to stop the clock. It wasn't to like install any great play or anything, and said let's run for something safe that we think might work, and we did, and it all worked out. So it was a great way to end the game for sure. Because I'll tell you what, we had a skeleton crew there late. We had Dimir was on the sideline, Choate was on the sideline, and overtime, maybe we could have done something, but I liked our chances, running that play and getting it done rather than going to overtime at that point.
Coach Knight, do you consider taking that timeout somewhat of a risk? I mean, Pete and I were talking to Ryan Ray, the Central's coach, after the football game, and he was saying he was also trying to call timeout at that point. So you beat him to it. He saves the timeout. And if Central makes a stop on that third down play, it makes things pretty sticky for you guys being in your own end of the field. So was it at all a risk to even call a timeout?
Not really, because I mean you're looking at I don't know how many seconds were on the clock when we had it, but I mean let's face it, was 3rd and 1 or whatever. Mm-hmm. It was short yardage, mm-hmm. and we thought we could get a first down, and then you get the first down, and we still have the ball, So otherwise, that clock is running, mm-hmm. and you have time for maybe 2 plays. So it was at that point, we had enough time if we got the first down, get out of bounds. Because I'll tell you, when he broke that run, I'm yelling, get out of bounds the whole time. And then when he broke it, we said, don't get out of bounds.
Right.
So it was actually pretty, we laughed about it after the game. But, that's kind of the way that was our thought process, And we weren't going to do anything crazy to score anyway. We wanted to keep the ball out of their hands, number one. And number two, get a chance, for a few plays. And it worked out,
Scott Knight, head coach of the Nashua South Panthers, is our guest. Big victory last night over Manchester Central, 35-28. When you were talking with Mark for the paper earlier in the week, you basically said, hey, there is pressure on us, and we need to get this thing done. And if we don't, well, we don't belong in this playoff conversation. You guys approached this game like it was a playoff game, didn't you?
I mean, we approach every game the same. I think emotionally it was probably a little bit different, but in terms of X and O's, preparation, practice, a lot of the things we do, whether we go light or go heavy, it depends on the condition of the kids, how they are after the previous week's game. I can tell you this right now, we're definitely got to lighten up this week. We got a lot of kids banged up, so, and next week our preparation could be different. So we didn't prepare any differently for this opponent, but emotionally, we knew we had to do, and I actually like that. I think the kids play better when they're a little bit on edge, and like last week against North, they're definitely always on edge, and that's a big game. Salem, we were on edge. It was our first home game, and I like how the kids play in those conditions.
Coach, have you, since last night's game ended and the way it ended, have you had a chance to step away from being South head coach and just kind of celebrate such a thrilling touchdown with your son? I mean, is there any point where you're like, that's my boy that just took off 71 yards for the touchdown, or are you still in coach mode and it's my quarterback made a great play?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it's really weird. It's I've never. We got to juggle this thing constantly, and I guess I was very proud. And I called him on the way home last night. I just told him I was proud of him as a dad, but I also said, let's make sure that none of this goes to our head, and let's and soak it in a little bit over the weekend, but let's get back to work Monday. So there is a juggling act going on constantly, to be honest with you.
Scott Knight from Nashua South. Want you to comment on some of the new names that we're starting to hear about on a weekly basis, and you already mentioned them, unfortunately for the wrong reason, being injured towards the end of the game and not being able to help you. But Steven Schode, a kid that's been making big plays for you guys, has got a lot of speed. You handed him the ball a couple of times. He's had some big kick returns and some pass receptions for touchdowns this year. And Daimir Hyde, a kid who didn't play for you the last couple of seasons, he's stepping up and becoming a 100-yard rusher for you. Those guys, where you been hiding them?
Steven Cho's been in our program for 4 years, and he had fought the injury bug all last year. So he had some nice plays early on in the Pinkerton game and some other games, but we were chasing an ankle all season long. And tell you what, this year he's number one in the state in receiving yards. So I don't think he's, I think people, obviously, he's got to have some attention. He also plays both ways. He plays outside linebacker for us, and he's just as good as a defensive player as he is an offensive player. We just haven't motioned a lot, and so you haven't seen, like, in the North game, two kids carried the ball the whole game. That was part of our game plan. It wasn't, we're not going to run this kid or that kid. It's just that's the way the game plan went. Last night we did a few things that we wanted to take a look at, a couple things that we really like, and that involved him running the ball, and because we know he can break, so he's a shifty kid. He found some nice seams last night, so he's been with us all along, and he's been our go-to guy. I think he's our MVP, to be honest with you, because of all his versatility as a receiver, as a runner, as a defensive player. Makes that big play in the end zone last night at the end of the half. So as far as Daimir goes, just a tough luck kid, and we saw some things when he was a freshman that we really liked, but just, wrist surgery next year, grades the next year, and I was so happy he came out. He's just you'd love that kid. He's just a tremendous kid, and he gets better every day. So we'll see where that ends up. I think his injury, I think he can be fine. We're going to take a look at him today.
Coach, which player for you defensively up front, either obviously on the line or in the linebacking core, who really impressed you last night? And I guess particularly the fourth quarter late in the game, because South was backed up quite a bit in that fourth quarter. Central, its last two possessions, started their drives at the 36 and 34-yard line of South. So your defense had to come up big. Who up front really impressed you to keep Central from really moving the ball even closer to the goal line?
You know, I couldn't tell you. I will say that Braden Hollowell, I would imagine he played pretty tough in there. Braden Hollowell and Matt Byers are two-way players. Those Matt Byers run around on one leg there in the fourth quarter, and he's our center. So, and all our snaps were right on the money last night. So those guys played really tough. And Kelvin Nianziani is our nose, and he really, I think when I look at the film today, I think he had a pretty good game as the thing wore on. He got better as it went.
Coach, on Channel 9, they're showing the highlight of a Trevor Knight touchdown run last night. Did you see the highlight yet of his game winner?
You know, I have not watched the film. When we win a game, I'm like less anxious to see the film. You know, I'm going to take a look at it. I'm actually at the high school now. After I talk to you guys, I'm going to take a look at the film. But, you know, when we lose, man, I'm up until that thing's posted on Huddle that night. I think I got to watch the film before I go to bed just so I can sleep to know what went wrong. So when you have a good game, I'm not as anxious. So we'll take a look at that in about 5 minutes.
Coach, I know that you don't want to look past next week, and you got a big one in Exeter, but I'm hoping you will for radio purposes, as I like to ask the coaches on this program. Next year, we're going to have the change in the setup, and you're going to be combined, Division I and Division II, and we're finally going to see that Bishop Girton-Nashua South game. What are your thoughts on that? As a Nashua guy myself, I'm excited about it. I wish we could have seen it when you guys were kind of at the top of your game and they were at the top of their game. But I'd love to get your take on finally getting to play BG.
You know what? If back in the day, it was a bigger deal. The kids, and I don't know what kind of deal it is to the Girton kids, but our kids have a different mindset now. Back when I played in the 80s, half the kids at Girton were Nashua kids. So it's almost like north-south. So it was a huge rivalry back then. Plus, it was the only other Nashua team. So definitely got a lot more attention. If you look at that roster now, there's very few Nashua kids. So there's less of a connection. And since we haven't played them so many years, our kids just don't. It's not this big rivalry thing anymore. I think it's going to be good. Don't get me wrong. And, you know, so we had a really short trip to Stellos, and we had a long trip to Keene, so maybe it equals out, you know. But so I mean, it's to us, it's one more game at Stellos, which I do like.
All right, Coach, we really appreciate the time. Exciting win last night. Keep it going. And this is going to make the month of October and hopefully November even more interesting to follow as all these teams are now kind of bunched up. You, Central, and Concord fighting for 2 spots between 3 teams. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. We just got to get healthy. When we get healthy, we'll be okay.
All right, Scott, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
You too. Scott Knight, head coach of the Nashua South. Great question, Mark, about the father-son thing.
Oh, thanks. I was just thinking about it myself. Like, what would I do if, someday when one of my little guys is out there doing something like that? It's got to. I mean,
and he didn't give you the coach speak either.
No, that was great. I like the honesty that it does seem like it would be tough to juggle. I mean, he must get asked about his. What's it like coaching your son? You must get asked that a million times. So, and when he does something special like that last night, at some point, don't you think as a dad you have to think like you break away from the coach mold for a second, even in the moment, and you're like, that's my boy that just won the game and maybe saved the season. So it's probably a pretty special night in the Knight household.
And I think it's cool for guys like me and you who both have young boys who aren't even close to playing team sports.
Right.
And I project out and I say, man, that would be cool to see my son do something like that.
Yeah.
It warmed my heart.
Yeah.
I don't mean to get all soupy here or anything like that,
No,
but
it's cool.
To me, question of the year, Mark. Ding, ding, ding.
Thanks.
We'll take a quick break, come back, wrap up the first hour of the program. Next hour, we got West head coach Jimmy Lozon, his team, going to take on the Bedford Bulldogs, one of the hottest teams in New Hampshire high school football. But don't look now, but West is a 500 football team.
They're actually above 500 if you count their their league opener. They're 500 in league play and 3-2 overall. So, I mean, you can't take away a win from the Blue Knights because they've had a rough go of it. But they're looking pretty, all things considered, they're looking pretty good through 5 games.
We'll talk to Coach Lozon in the next hour of the New Hampshire High School Football Show. You're listening to it on WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
You found the best place for local high school football talk. It's the New Hampshire High School Football Show on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Getting close to 8 o'clock here, hour number 1 of the program, just about in the books. We go around the state last night and looking ahead to today. Pete Terrier, along with Mark Thaler, WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave. You can also get us online. You can watch the show, nhsportspage.com. John Kesty comes in and films the thing each and every other week, and we bring you what we like to say, the best coverage on Saturday morning on the radio. And let's start last night, Gill Stadium, Manchester Central, Nashua South. We just talked to Coach Scott Knight about it. Trevor Knight, the 71-yard touchdown run to win the game in the final seconds for Nashua South over Manchester Central.
Big win, tremendous athlete. Ryan Ray was praising Trevor Knight after the game as well, just saying he's an incredible athlete. He proved it. 3 rushing touchdowns, passing touchdowns. I mean, what else do you say?
Riley Cody had a good game, too, for Manchester Central.
Yeah.
I didn't think their running game was as good as it has been. That two-headed monster with Weekly and Velez, I thought South did a decent job with that. But, look, you're just going to have to outscore Manchester Central if you want to beat them, and Central's biggest problem is defense.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Where I would disagree with you, though, is I think that Central is actually at its best when it's running the football. And I know...
That's what I'm saying. They didn't play that well
I see.
last night with the running
I'm sorry.
game.
I misunderstood. Yeah, I think that Hector Velez carried the ball very well last night. They just seem to have a different attitude or toughness maybe when they're running the ball, and I don't think they do it enough. And I know they have the weapons in the aerial game, between Riley Cody, Troy Peltier, a few other kids, but when they run the ball, they're just, when I've seen them this year, they just seem like a mean, angry team, and I'd like to see them get back to that a little bit more.
Exeter beat Salem last night 35-6. It was close for a little while, but Exeter proving that, hey, we're still pretty good.
Yeah, they're one of the top teams in the state, and they're taking care of business.
Interesting game between Concord and Londonderry last night. Concord jumped out to a pretty big lead. Londonderry came storming back, and then Concord put the finishing touches on them. A huge game for Tolbert Nemo.
Yeah, and it's a good thing that the Tide won that game, given what we know about the South Central final.
Yeah, Memorial and Pinkerton later on today. Memorial got beat up last week by Central. Real tough task today in Derry.
I agree with you. More of the same.
Let's look at Division II. We talked a little bit about that Keene and Dover game. Dover loses another squeaker, 21-20 at Keene. Winner kind of on top of Spalding, 34-20. Do you know if Ben Ferenz also played in that game? Because he was injured in the game against Exeter and then was limited last week in the win against Dover, the double overtime win.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe somebody can give us a call in the second hour, but number 1 team in the state also taking care of business.
Another tough night for Merrimack. They lose at Timberland 49-12. Division II game you'll be at this afternoon, Manchester West at Bedford.
Yeah, I'm hoping it'll be a good one. I'd like to see what West has so far this year. They're 3-2 overall. They've matched their win total from last year. They're not talking playoffs. That's not their thing right now. They're just trying to improve, and they're happy to be playing football. But that's a feel-good story, certainly so far.
Let's go quickly in Division III. Souhegan ruins the night in Pembroke when they bring in artificial lights. The Sabres roll 40-13.
Yep, Souhegan looking good. Looks like they're back in that playoff hunt that they missed last year.
And just some quick scores from Division III. Portsmouth beating Hollis Brookline 35-19. Alvern over Conval 28-21. I don't think there was any surprises there.
Nope.
We got another hour on the other side at 8 o'clock coming up. And then we'll have Jimmy Lozon from Manchester West. He'll be our guest at 8:20 this morning.
The rest of our lives to be mediocre, but we have the opportunity to play like gods for the next half of football. But we can't be afraid to lose. There's no room for fear in this game.
This is the New Hampshire High School Football Show.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
If you can't stand the way this place is, take yourself to higher places.
The New Hampshire High School Football Show is brought to you by New Hampshire State Liquor Commission's Division of Enforcement.
I don't want them to gain another yard.
You blitz all night. If they cross the line of scrimmage, I'm going to take every last one of you out.
And now, here are your hosts, Pete Terrier.
And it's just disappointing that every time me and you go to the same game, it's blowout. We will not make that mistake again.
And Mark Thaler.
As far as I'm concerned, there's only one poll, and people can take shots at me if they want for that, but it's just imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
And I'll offer this up to you. Next time you have me make a trip out to Keene, if you want to come next Friday to see Bedford Keene, I'll buy you dinner.
Hour number 2 of the program. Already had a good first hour. Scott Knight, head coach of the Nashua South Panthers, joined us talking about his team's thrilling victory last night at Gill Stadium in Manchester. We also talked a little concussions and will it end football in Dover with John Doyle of the Foster's Daily Democrat and Fosters.com. John says he's happy to report that football will not go away in Dover, but it is a very, very concerning subject, head injuries and concussions. And as I mentioned, next week on the program, we will have the trauma coordinator and a nurse practitioner at St. Joseph's Hospital in Nassau, Sue Barnard, will be on the program talking about their impact testing programs that they have. They have some clinics coming up in the month of October and November. I'm actually going to be going there and taking the test myself this week, and then we'll be able to talk about that experience and, just try and help inform, do our part to help inform people about the problem in today's sporting world, especially in high school sports. These kids, their young minds are a terrible thing to be mushing around in the game of football or whatever. So you got to take precautions and, just be ready for it and know how to deal with it if it does happen. All right, before we get into the hour, let us get our update here on the scoreboard from last night around the state of New Hampshire. It is brought to you by the New Hampshire Liquor Commission's Division of Enforcement and their Buyers Beware program, reminding all adults it is against the law to provide alcohol to minors. Here's Mark with the scoreboard.
All right, Pete, 15 games played last night, starting in Division 1. Game of the night, top 10 matchup. Number 8, Nashua South beat number 5, Manchester Central, 35-28. South junior quarterback Trevor Knight with a 71-yard touchdown run in the final seconds to win the game. Knight finished with 133 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. He also threw for 136 and a score. Riley Coey for Manchester Central also threw for 3 touchdowns. But Daimir Hyde, the big part of South's tandem there in the backfield, he ran for 137 and a touchdown. So a lot of scoring last night. South comes out on top, might have saved its season, at least for now. Exeter looking very good still. They knocked off Salem 35-6 and conquered with a big win against Londonderry 44-28. Tolbert Nemo and Robert Law each with 3 touchdowns for the Crimson Tide. In Division 2, Keene beat Dover by a point, 21-20. Timberlane beat Merrimack by more than 1 point, 49-12. It's been a tough season for the Tomahawks, Pete. Josh David for Timberlane, he went at it last night. 139 yards for the Owls, 3 scores for him. Number 1 win at Cunnett with a 14-point win over Spalding, 34-20. 3 games in Division 3 last night. Sauhegan with a 40-13 win over Pembroke. Alvern by a touchdown over Conval, 28-21. And Portsmouth big over Hollis Brookline, 35-19. Dylan Crosby for the Clippers, over 100 yards rushing for them. In Division 4, Trinity 46, Kennett 7. 5 different players scored touchdowns for the Pioneers. Those 5 being Brad Rhodes, Justin Johnson, Austin Chambers, Romeo Masuku, and Ryan Carrier. Plymouth still undefeated in Division 4, 30-14 win over Laconia, and Hanover with a big win over Kingswood, 46-8. Quarterback Sean Cavallaro and receiver Cyrus Rothwell Ferraris, each with 3 touchdowns for the Marauders. 3 more games to report, 2 of them in Division 5. Kearsarge 49, Pelham 13, and Somersworth with a shutout win over Stevens, 27-0. Josh Ream just shy of 200 yards rushing last night. The surprise one, at least for me, in non-league play last night, the final score to report from Friday night. Milford of Division 3 beat Nashua North of Division 1, 24-21. The difference, a Morgan Andrews 30-yard field goal with about 8+ minutes to play. Again, 24-21. The Spartans looking good in Division 3, and that's a statement win for them.
I picked Nashua North to win that game, figuring that Coach Roby was going with his guys.
Yeah.
And I got a text out to a friend of mine who happens to be an assistant coach of the Milford Spartans asking if Roby did play the guys, but I didn't get any responses of yet. So, hey, look, that's a good win for Milford. I knew that they were going to be probably that fourth playoff team in Division III. You got the obvious top teams in Souhegan and Portsmouth in D3. And then Goffstown, Connor, Benjamin alone is going to probably carry them to the playoffs. But then it's who's that fourth team? And Milford looks like the team. I think people maybe at the beginning of the year said, well, what about Alvern? They're moving down from Division II, but they haven't been a real good football program in Division II, and they're not really doing that well in Division III this year. So Milford really with the opportunity to step up, and they're taking advantage of their situation, and that's a good win. Is that a big boy win, Mark?
No.
You called certain teams like Bedford when they beat Keene at Keene. That was a big boy win. I assume Nashua South against Central last night, a big boy win?
No.
Or they're a big boy already?
They're already big boys, yeah. The big boy, that's the phrase I use. I reserve it for really special, impressive wins. The Bedford Keene win was a big boy win because Bedford up to Division II this year, and that was really a real challenge to go on a bus ride like that, go to a place like Keene and to win. That was definitely a big boy win. I don't consider the South Central game to be a big boy win. I don't consider Milford Nashua North either. It's a nice win for the Spartans. I understand, like I think we said last week, I understand why the lower division teams would want to play these games. It's beyond me why the larger schools would want to reciprocate, I guess. But to me, it's not a big boy win. It's a nice, impressive win that the Spartans were able to pull that one out.
Looking around the schedule of games today, and even going back to last night, there wasn't a lot of great games. Remember last week it was like, wow, how many games? These games are all awesome. There's like 5 awesome games, 5-star games, if you will. Today you got Memorial at Pinkerton in D1, Manchester West at Bedford. Outside of the fact that the Bedford kids used to go to Manchester West, that's what I say. You're hoping for a better game because you're going to be covering it for the Union Leader. Merrimack Valley at Goffstown, Division 4, you got Lebanon at St. Thomas, John Stark at Wyndham, Stop me when you find one that isn't, Division 5, Sanborn at Interlakes Moltenboro, Bow at Epping Newmarket. Division 6. Do I even have to go down there? Non-league game. This one is not but it is because it doesn't count. Catholic Memorial at BG at Stello Stadium. I mean, at one point, that was a game that you wanted to see when BG was in their glory years. Not that they're down significantly from that, but they're not, back 2009, circa 2009 BG. You would like to see Catholic Memorial come in and play BG just to see how they could do against out of state, and they would actually.
Is that game going on?
Well, I see it on your newspaper.
I thought it could be. I mean, I'm not in the office on Friday nights, but I thought they had a bye this week, Bishop Garden. I didn't know if they were. I didn't think they were playing the game this year.
I don't know. I'm just reading out of the newspaper here, so maybe
Somebody
it is.
Correct me
maybe
if I
it
could be
isn't.
wrong. I could be wrong.
If you know this true story of that, 645-6161. But remember when a time when you would get excited for a Catholic Memorial to come in against Bishop Garden?
Yeah, 2009 was the first year that Tony Johnson and the athletic director Alex Campia, who's also the football coach there, put that game together, and
BG won that game too, didn't they?
52-13.
They crushed them.
That was the 2000. That was one of the single season all time teams there. Bishop Girton had one of those really rare teams that was that good, and 52-13.
All right, so not the greatest of weeks.
No, I was thinking the same thing when I first looked at the schedule last Sunday night, Monday morning, whenever it was. Looking ahead to week 6, and I thought the very same thing. Week 5 was awesome.
Yeah.
Week 6 is not so much.
Yeah. Well,
you got to get through them though. You got to get through these kind of weeks.
Yeah. And next week, I'm sure that there'll be plenty of good games. We'll take a look ahead at the schedule of games next week. I know there's some good ones. You got that Nashua South against Exeter on Friday night. I've already openly committed to making the drive out to Keene and seeing Winnicott against Keene. I think that should be an interesting game.
Can I just say real quick? I still laugh every time we play that new open now with Coach Lupa saying I'll buy you dinner for some. It's just there's no point to what I'm saying other than it's just funny. I think it's just cracks me up.
You're gonna laugh even worse when I take him up on that dinner.
Right?
After Winnicott goes in there and blows him out. Hey, Coach Lupa, I'm here to collect that dinner offer.
How about that meal?
He'll be like, here's a voucher for a Big Mac at McDonald's. Get the hell out of here. Right. Don't come back. Hey, I want to point out a couple of outstanding student athletes here in the state of New Hampshire. The NHIAA announced their student athletes of the month for September. Female student athlete of the month, Allison Latham, senior at Merrimack High School, three-sport athlete, volleyball, basketball, spring track. She's also a National Honor Society member. She's a New England Student Athlete Leadership Conference attendee, senior class secretary, captain of the girls volleyball team, sportsmanship awards in both track and basketball. So congratulations to Allison Lathan, the female student athlete of the month, anointed by the NHIAA. Also, your male student athlete of the month, Graham Nyhan, senior at Laconia High School. He also is a three-sport athlete, member of that football team that's been struggling so much for Laconia. Also plays basketball and baseball for the Sachems, captain in all three sports. He's a top-notch student, honors courses, first-team All-State in football and baseball during last year, his junior year, and he's volunteered over 100 hours of his time for community service. So congratulations to Allison Latham of Merrimack and Graham Nyan of Laconia High School, the NHIAA's Student Athletes of the Month for September. And after I got the press release, I responded back to those guys and said, hey, we'll talk about this on the show. And Hank Basil, who is pretty much the right-hand man for Pat Corbin at the NHIAA, said, I love the show. I listen to it often when I'm up and about. And he said that we do a really good job.
All right, thank you.
And I said to myself, oh, boy, all the times we've ripped the NHIAA and accused them of being, not as good as we think they could be. This guy listens to the show, so we appreciate it.
Yeah.
Look, I think they do a pretty good job. There's some concerns that I have, and I've attended their media days each of the last few years, and I've actually brought up some suggestions on some things that I think they could do a little bit better and things that I'd like to see as a media member. And they are very gracious, and they do try and accept it. They catch a lot of heat.
They sure do.
They really do. And, a lot of guys like us can sit here and throw, lob stuff at them, and they listen to the program and they hear some of this stuff, and they try and do the best they can.
Yeah, they're non-profit too. I mean, it's not like they're not making gobs of money and. There's a bunch of
Did you catch that on film,
you can
John?
See that on the camera.
As this giant bug just flew right past Mark.
Man.
You know what it is?
It's like Attack of the Killer something.
It's those stink bugs.
Yeah.
You guys have seen them out there.
Yeah.
They're all over the place. Last night at Gill Stadium in the press box, there was like 3 of them like flying in. They're all over the place. My word of advice, do not crush them because they smell like pine. If you crush them, throw them outside or flush them down the toilet or something. I learned from experience. They're all over the place. So if you see us ducking on the video cast here, it's because we're being dive bombed by these huge giant beetles.
You know why.
That's why I'm glad I'm separated.
Yeah, Kayla's in the other room. Yeah, there are probably a bunch of them in there too.
That's not funny.
The beauty of fall type of weather, especially yesterday, it was like 80 degrees.
Yeah, that was nice.
Here come the ladybugs out of the woodwork. Now these stink bugs are multiplying like crazy. It is a problem statewide. I say we fumigate. They fumigate stuff for Triple E.
Yeah.
And the what is it? The West Nile virus. Yeah. They make them start football games at Timberlane High School at 6:30 to avoid that stuff.
I'm going to keep my eye on the ceiling now because I see one of those suckers on the. It's like
if we seem distracted today.
If I lose my train of thought again, now you know why.
Look, as long as no spider comes lowering down in front of my face while we're doing the show, I'll be all set. We got to take a time out, come back. We'll talk to Jimmy Lozon, see if there's a stink bug problem at Manchester West High School as his team, the Blue Knights, prepares to take on Bedford. That's a rivalry game, folks. Bedford, 2 o'clock this afternoon. Mark Thaler will have coverage in the New Hampshire Sunday News tomorrow. We'll talk with Jimmy Lozon from West as the New Hampshire High School Football Show continues on WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
Football. It's the New Hampshire High School Football Show with Pete Terrier and Mark Thaler on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Well, if you read Mark Thaler's stuff in the New Hampshire Union Leader or on his outstanding website, NewHampshireGameDay.com, you certainly saw a lot about the West Blue Knights high school football team this week. Mark, a West alum himself, probably pretty happy about the team's success so far this season, off to a 3-2 start, 2-2 in Division II. And here to talk about the program with us is Jimmy Lozon, the head coach of the team. Coach, good morning to you.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay, and we're glad to have you. And Mark certainly has spent a lot of time extolling how the season is working out for you guys so far. A lot of people expected a lot from you guys this year, but you just continue to prove people wrong. 2-2 in the division. I thought a real quality win for you guys was a couple of weeks ago. That shootout against Timberlane, 43-40 was the score. What is it about this team that you like so much 5 weeks into the season?
Well, let's make sure that, we still have a ways to go. I mean, 3-2, we played a great first half, but we have a tough second half ahead of us. But the team overall is just, we said it in the off season. We didn't know how they'd be on the football field, but they're a good group of guys, and they're smart. Some of them are smart, which is, something different. We haven't had, very smart players in the past that have kind of taken in the game plan and stuff like that, and these kids have kind of picked things up. And this was the first off season I had with the team, and we had 37 kids finish, the off season workout and get their reward at the end of the summer, which was the most we've had since I played. So I mean, I think that's helped a lot too.
Jim, when we talked earlier in the week, you had told me that the theme, whether it be official or unofficial, is that last year's team set the table, and then this year's now it's time to eat. This is the chance for these kids to eat. Can you just tell me a little bit about where did that kind of philosophy or mantra come from?
Well, I'll be the first to admit I watch NFL Network all the time, and I take things from them all the time. But that one I came up with on my own. And I don't know if it was like a spur of the moment thing when I was talking to the team, and but I was really trying to get them to at the beginning of the year. I think there's a lot of kids talking about how we were going to replace Aaron Martin, and we weren't going to be anything, and so I just kind of used that as a tone, and the kids liked it, and they responded, and we've just been saying it ever since.
Coach, being so young and not having all that much head coaching experience, 24 years of age, was it hard to kind of win the respect of the kids? Did you get some, hey, what does this guy know? He's barely out of high school himself.
Right. No. I didn't. That never was an issue. I think the kids actually respect me because of how hard I worked, and they knew I was football all the time. I mean, sometimes they'll leave and they'll come back a couple hours later. They'll drive by and they'll still see me at the school, and they'll be like, "Coach, you ever go home? You ever go to bed?" So I think they realize how hard I work at it, and they just respect me for it. And they know I'm all about football. I mean, it's year round for me. They know I know the game, and I try to make it fun for them too. So the kids, they never, they hopefully never get sick of me.
So Jim, now the team is on a modest 2-game win streak, and as I wrote in the paper earlier this week, it's the first win streak for West since the 2006 season, back in the Division I days, back when you were the quarterback for the football team. How special, or would you describe it as special, to have any kind of win streak at this point? Is modest as it may be, is it extra special for you to be coaching the team that has strung 2 wins together, given the recent history of the program?
I mean, it's I love it. I love the story. If I wasn't a part of it, I'd love the story. I think it's great. I think it's great for the kids. And Zach Zimba put it right in the in the paper that we're just happy to be playing for something. 5 games into the season, the second half, and still be talked about, and have an article midway through the season, not the beginning of the season. A lot of our hype came at the beginning of the season last year, and now we're still in it. Going into week 6. So I think it's great for the kids, and the fact that the last time we had a win streak was when I played. I mean, I don't know. You gotta love that kind of stuff. I love it.
Well, what I loved about our conversation the other day too is you were telling me a story about how you recently hosted a team dinner on Thursday night, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Take it from there when you were saying you broke out the scrapbook from your playing days.
Yeah, I have a thick scrapbook. You wouldn't believe it. Probably a couple articles from you in there, and the kids just couldn't get over how thick it was. Just 2 years of playing. And it wasn't all me. It was just anything from our team. And my grandmother had saved it for those 2 years and just put it together. And so the kids, they were just amazed. Like they get in the paper, they might get a little tidbit, but they couldn't believe how many articles and pictures we had in just 2 years. so that they love that. And then, I had like a collage that a girl made me in high school, my senior night, and they couldn't get over it. They loved it. So.
Jimmy Lozon, head coach of Manchester West Blue Knights. His team heading into Bedford. Not a long road trip for you, Coach. The rivalry between your team and the Bulldogs kind of started when they opened up their school a few years ago, and I think this becomes more of a rivalry game than a game against the other Manchester schools. Has it turned that way because you're not in the same division with any of those schools? What is the rivalry now for Manchester West?
Well, it's definitely a rivalry, between, as far as the kids go and the history. We've got the last time we went there, we lost, I think, 51-6 or 51-12. So we've got to play in a good game at some point for it to be a true rivalry. But no, it's there. It should be a rivalry. As long as we eventually get to where Bedford is, as far as talent goes and all that kind of stuff, then it's going to be a built-in rivalry. I agree. The Central rivalry has kind of faded out the last couple of years because we haven't gotten to face them, and I miss that like crazy. So to have an opportunity to play Bedford and have an angle to use with the kids to get them fired up, and I don't have to say much before this one. They're going to be ready to go. Like you said, it's just built in.
So what would you say is the priority for West today in terms of hanging with Bedford and maybe, just maybe, pulling off what would probably be the biggest upset of the season?
That's the plan. We'll do our best. We had a good week of practice. The kids at this point in the season, they know anything's possible. After the Timberlane game, coming off 2 losses, we go into that game, and we had a good week of practice, and I kind of use that as a point. When you play well all week and you prepare well, anything can happen out there. And I told them it hasn't been a big upset yet this year. So why not us? But we know, that's a good team. That's a good team, and we won't get down on ourselves if they jump off on us. But we'll do our best to hang with them.
Coach, you mentioned one of the tasks you had going into the year, and that was replacing your do-everything quarterback, Aaron Martin, who really ran the show and carried that team throughout the course of last season and the last couple of seasons. But you got a new quarterback this year, Zach Zimba. You mentioned him. He's done some things similar to what Aaron Martin did, running the football, able to throw the football to his teammates, and he's definitely moved your football team and been a good leader for you guys this year.
Yeah. Like I told Mark, I can't say enough about the kid. He told Mark, he came up to me in November last year and told me he wanted to put the team on his back, and he wanted all the pressure and he wanted to play quarterback, and we knew ability-wise, throwing anyways, that we had a lot of work to do. And I told him, I said, listen, we can do this, but it's going to take from here until the season starts. And I don't know where that kid comes from. I'm having a son in a month, and I hope he's just like Zach Zimba, I'll tell you, because this kid is the hardest worker I have ever seen. I've only been around high school football. I don't know what it's like at the collegiate level or anything, but he went at the beginning of the summer. We went and ran hills, and he ran 10 hills, and he was dying. And I'm like, we got to run this hill every day. You're going to be carrying the ball 15 to 30 times a game, and boba, and by the end of the summer, he was running 25 hills a day, and every single day. I'm not kidding. He'd be at the field, 30 minutes before me if we were going to meet, and he'd stay there longer. He got sessions with the kids by themselves. They'd be down there running 2 minutes up and down the field. He wanted to learn the playbook, back in May. He did 7-on-7 for me and pretty much ran the show. It was just, I can't say enough about the kid.
Coach, did you say that you're going to be a dad in a month?
I'm going to be a dad November 13th.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Back to football now. I wanted to make sure I heard you. That's great news. But back to football. What would you say is the biggest adjustment that you've made from year 1 to year 2 of being a head football coach?
It's like night and day. I couldn't even explain to you guys how much I learned last year. And I look back and I'm like, man, I was an idiot. I don't know. I didn't know this. I didn't know that. But it's just learning firsthand, and I'm learning as we go. I think I'm learning not to put in too much and not to try and make too much happen. The kids do better when they don't have a ton of plays to remember, when they can just and I kind of took that from Bill Ball when I talked to him, and how he just runs the same plays over and over again, and he's just become great at them. And our first quarter of the season this year with the kids was, from Bruce Lee. I don't fear the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who's practiced one kick 10,000 times. And that's kind of been our philosophy. We just practice and we rep everything. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned is, slim it down, and the kids get better at it.
Coach, you've personally played in turkey bowls in Manchester. The way they do it now with all the teams that are in Manchester eligible for the Turkey Bowl, it's based on schedule, regular season schedule. You don't all play each other head-to-head, although you guys do have a game against Memorial coming up in a couple of weeks. That game, obviously, if you win, can help you get closer to a Turkey Bowl bid, but is that something that you guys talk about? Do you set it as one of your goals? I'm sure division goes first, but is Turkey Bowl something that you guys talk about as something that you want to achieve?
To be completely honest, that's the one thing I want to accomplish before I stop coaching at West at any point. I don't know when it'll be, but that's the one thing, I really want to get to a Turkey Bowl. I know that was the best day of the year for me. I grew up, I haven't missed a Turkey Bowl since I can remember. So I was probably 3 or 4 years old. My dad's been bringing me, and I absolutely love it. So I would love, and I hope the kids get to experience that, because these seniors have never been there, and so they don't know what it's like. I would love to be in Turkey Bowl. I don't know how it will work out. I know it's going to be pretty tough to beat Trinity as far as the points go, and then Central's got a very good team. And like you said, that head-to-head battle against Memorial that could determine a third place or possibly a second place. But we don't really talk about it. At the beginning of the season, I set the goals, and our goal obviously is to make the playoffs, and especially now because it's there, we can reach it. But definitely to get to the Turkey Bowl. And I try to explain to the kids in first practice, you don't know what it's like, guys. It might even bring in more fans than a playoff game, because everyone comes back for it.
All right, Coach. Well, we really appreciate it. We wish you the best of luck, not only today, but in your attempt to get to a Turkey Bowl. Thank you so much for the time, and get your sleep now, Coach, because once that baby's born, things change. I'm sure you heard that before, but congratulations, and good luck, all right?
All right, thank you for having me.
All right, Jimmy Lozon, head coach of the Manchester West Blue Knights. And you can tell that a guy like me and a guy like you, we've been around for a little while, because we used to cover him when he was playing. And the scrapbook story is great.
Yeah.
That is good.
It was a great I really enjoyed talking to him earlier this week before their practice on Monday, I think it was. They were doing their walkthrough practice. So I got to chat with him for quite a while, and he was, kind of good-natured, busting my chops because I've been picking against West, and he's like, and you're an alum, what are you doing? And but then he was telling me about the story about having the whole team over and breaking out the scrapbook. It was in context that we were talking about how West used to get a heck of a lot more attention than it does now, and obviously a lot of that has to do with you cover the teams typically that win. Because they have the impact on the playoff picture down the road, and West has had a tough go of it. So it's just the fact that they're 3-2 at this point, it says a ton. they won 3 games all last year. This is a 24-year-old guy in his second year as a varsity football coach. He's already got him at 3 wins. They're on their first win streak since 2006 when he played. To me, and this is, forget that I went to West. This is like the feel-good story of the year at this point.
This is last year's Spalding right now.
I say more. To me, it's more than that. But I'd probably get an argument from folks on the Seacoast. But maybe that's because I'm a little more tied into it, I guess, on this part of the state. But I just think because of the way things ended with Bedford leaving and how things just went south so quickly, for all the athletic programs, really. But obviously, football gets the most attention, or the biggest chunk of it. But it just seems like it's a really neat story so far to be 3-2. They're going to Bedford. Of all the teams to play this week, it's Bedford. Can you imagine if look, to me, they're decided underdogs in this game to win, and I've said that to Coach Lozon. He knows it. But if they were somehow to beat the Bulldogs today, can you?
David and Goliath type
really,
of story.
I mean, that's not exaggerating. It really would be like that. I mean, this team has 22 kids on its varsity roster. They have 45 kids in total when you count the JV kids. Coach told me that they substitute a number of their JV kids in different offensive and defensive packages. 22 guys on their varsity team. Bedford has, I think Kurt Hines told me in the preseason, he had 114 kids in his program.
Yeah.
I mean, it really, like you said, it really is David Goliath. Goliath should win, but crazier things have happened.
And watch out for that slingshot, Goliath.
Yeah.
All right, we'll come back, take a break, and go around the state. Want to get into something crazy that happened this week. It was a Twitter war going on between you and Jeremy Levier from NHNotebook.com. Got to talk about that, and I'm sure Jeremy is still going to vote for Dover. He'll prove his point. Hey, they lost by 1 point at a tough Keene team last night. I'm moving them up to number 9 in the poll. We'll talk about that when we return. It is the New Hampshire High School Football Show. WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
You found the best place for local high school football talk. It's the New Hampshire High School Football Show on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Well, I make a lot of fun about the fact that I'm new to this Twitter thing, and I'm trying to warm up to it, and I really am. I'm enjoying it. And you'd said a couple of weeks ago that, man, Twitter kind of occupies a lot of your time. You spend a lot of time on there, and it takes away from other stuff like fathering, being a husband,
I hope not too much.
Sleep, things like that. And I'm getting to know it, and it's exploding, and it's obviously big, and it's a good way to communicate, and it's a good way to get information. And, I'm happy to say that I have now produced 46 tweets in my history, and I'm up to 34 followers at Pete Terrier. I got the Power Pole logo up as my profile picture. The only reason I did that, and people are like, what an idiot, he puts the Power Pole logo up there. I didn't have any pictures of myself handy, so when I was trying to post a picture, that was the only one that came up that had anything to do with me. I could have put a picture of my kids up or my wife or whatever, but I put the Power Pole logo up, maybe to help people know who the heck I am. But you can follow me at Pete Terrier. My goal is to get to 35 followers by the end of the show. We'll see if it can happen. My most famous tweet, foolish tweet, was last night. Says 11 hours ago. I tweeted OT baby about 25 seconds before the end of that Nashua South Central game. Of course, Trevor Knight went on to score a touchdown run on the very next play, a 71-yarder, and I had to correct myself and say, oops, look, South just won on Trevor Knight's touchdown run. Following today, and John Doyle, who was a guest on our show earlier talking about the Dover concussion thing, he is at John Doyle 603. He just gave a Twitter shout out. Thanks to me and you, Mark, for having him on the radio show. And he also plugged our producer, Kayla, who I'm sure is on Twitter as well. Says also, producer Kayla, hashtag don't forget the producer.
I appreciate
that. So you
that.
get some props from John Doyle.
I push buttons back here.
What is this hashtag thing, John? Mark? Sorry.
It allows you to put certain tweets in. It's a way to categorize tweets. So if you type something out on Twitter, OT baby, and then you type hashtag Nashua South, anything with the hashtag Nashua South, any tweet by anybody is going to go under that umbrella. So it's a way to group tweets. So if I've been, for instance, for Friday night and Saturday games, after most of my tweets, if I have enough characters left, I'll type hashtag NHIAA football. And that allows all tweets, whether I put them out there or somebody else that uses the same hashtag, it allows all those tweets to go and think of it as the same pool. So somebody can call up that hashtag and see all the tweets under that heading. So it's a way to categorize.
Did you notice, you said hashtag Nashua South, after they broke the huddle last night, after Coach Knight gave him a little post-game pep talk and then came over and talked to us reporters, they were doing something with hashtags. The coaching staff and the players, they had a little exchange like hashtags. They did something like that.
There's a way to, people talk like that. I'll full disclosure, I joke around. I do that with my wife. Like, we'll over text, we'll do like just to be goofy, like hashtag this or hashtag that. But yeah, people tend to talk like that.
So do you like communicate with your wife via Twitter now? You don't like?
No, she's not on Twitter. She doesn't follow me.
Okay, she doesn't follow.
She won't follow me. She's not on Twitter at all. But
so when you say you're explaining something to her, you say you follow me, and she's like, "No, I don't follow you."
Pretty much.
Well, there was a Twitter war. Exploded earlier this week between Mark Thaler, who is what is it, at _ Mark Thaler or at Mark _
Mark _ Thaler.
All right. That's your Twitter handle.
Correct.
Is that the correct term?
You got it.
All right. Jeremy Levier, who was like at New Hampshire Notebook or whatever it is. I go on Twitter the other day. Well, first of all, I get all these emails and all these text messages saying you got to check out this situation going on between Thaler and Jeremy Levier of NHNotebook.com, where Jeremy is just pounding you about not voting for Concord in the power poll. Or what was it? It was like you didn't vote for Nashua, or you had Nashua South ahead of Concord in the power poll on your last ballot this week, knowing that Concord had beaten Nashua South 20-3 and dominated them a couple of weeks ago, and Jeremy was just hammering you incessantly.
Yeah, well, the actual power poll had Nashua South ranked ahead of Concord. On my particular ballot, I didn't rank Concord at all, knowing full well that Concord had already beaten South. I was at that game. I covered it. So he took issue with that.
And was just hammering you. And you are one that's not very controversial guy, doesn't like, to get into it, and to each their own. You're cool with that. Have your opinion, whatever. But you kind of answered back. And then it just blew up.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, there's like 50,000 tweets in the middle of the night, and of you guys kind of going back and forth at each other.
Well, not me through the middle of the night.
No.
But yeah, there was, over the course of a couple of days, there was some back and forth. I will explain myself to anybody who asks. And I gave my explanation as to why I didn't vote for Concord. The original explanation was people have to understand that the actual power poll is based on the number of points each team accumulates based on the people who vote in the poll. I think more often than not, people assume I think people think that I'm the only person that puts together the power poll because I write most of the time about it. Mm-hmm. But there are other people. There's 8 of us that vote. That being said, I was just offering the explanation that this is not just me. It's an accumulation of points. But I said, however, I did not vote for Concord, and that was he found that to be problematic, I guess, because Concord had beaten Nashua South 20-3. So he's saying they won the head-to-head game, and you have the team that lost. You're ranking the team that lost and not including the team that won. And from there, the explanation just wasn't good enough. So I had finally joked that the power poll police were after me, and that there are a few people out there that like that one. Justin McIsaac actually was the one who officially, I think, declared it a Twitter fight or a Twitter war. So it dust-ups. It happens.
It's just entertaining.
I had fun.
It's a lot of fun, and
yeah.
I can see how it gets addicting, and I see how you can't kind of put it down, but at some point you just have to put it down.
Right.
You just have to. You have to go away.
Unplug.
And, I thought you gave Jeremy a pretty good zinger when you said, hey, one thing's for sure, I will not be voting for a 1-4 team in my top 10.
That came off of a 20-point loss.
Right.
Right. He was questioning my logic and his logic for the mock poll, the other poll that goes on out there. He voted for Dover at the time 1-3, now 1-4 in the league play, but nonetheless sub 500 by more than one game, coming off of a 20-point loss, and that's a top 10 team. I don't understand that. I will say this though, I think last night proved that I kind of have a clue, and I'll toot my own horn, because look, coming into last night's game, Central was ranked 5, South was ranked 8th. I picked Central to win. I figured the higher ranked team would win. Mm-hmm. That didn't happen, but nonetheless, those two teams played. South beat Central, which manhandled Concord, and of course Concord beat South. My point being that you can't base power poll voting on any single one head-to-head win. You can do that in the first week or so of the season because you don't have anything else to go by. But I say it all the time, every year. I scream it half the time. Is that when you get to week 5, 6, 7, things start to get muddied. We have a 3-way tie amongst Concord, Central, and South now, all 1-1. They've beaten each other. So you can't just base things on head-to-head wins. And that's my overall point, is that it is possible also for an inferior team to win a game once in a while at any level of sports. It happens. We've all seen it. So you can't solely base things on one head-to-head win. That was my point, and that's my logic. I thought that South is still the better team. I think, I still think it proved it last night. They went into Central and beat a team that manhandled Concord. Again, they're all 1-1 though. So head-to-head wins have significance, no doubt about it, but it's not the be-all, end-all.
Right. And neither is the power poll. The power poll is not the be-all, end-all. It's a conversation piece. It's a conversation starter, and it gets people talking about high school football.
You got it.
And that's a good thing. And that's why this thing was put together.
Yep.
Not to align the playoff format, not to set seeds and say, okay, well, you're number 1 in the power poll, so you're going to play the number 10 team and so on down. That's not what it's about, people. It's about conversation. Final story. That's it.
Right, and which is funny because I got somebody wrote on my blog earlier this week that told me that I'm first of all told me that I'm a joke. And this is funny stuff. I really do laugh at this. Quote a joke, and also that the person hopes that I realize the evil I bring to high school football coverage.
Goodness.
And one of the points that was made in this anonymous email, which those drive me bad, he put your name to it, but this anonymous email said that who do you think you are, like ranking high school football teams? It's not the NFL or college football. That was never never the intent. The power poll was not created to set up some kind of a playoff format. It was to start and create some conversation,
right.
and that's what it does. But it's never been about trying to mimic the NFL power rankings or college football. It's not an AP poll or a BCS poll that's going to determine who plays whom in the second season, the postseason. So it's just to have some fun. I thought my explanation to Jeremy, the initial one, was enough, and it just wasn't. And so you got to dust up, but hey, it happens.
It was a lot of fun to watch. I'm sure we're going to see more of that. All right, we got to get to a break. Come back. We'll wrap up the program. It is the New Hampshire High School Football Show, WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
You found the best place for local high school football talk. It's the New Hampshire High School Football Show on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Well, I have achieved my goal, Mark, and now I can retire. I successfully picked up my 35th follower, the milestone 35th follower.
Congratulations.
I want to thank our producer, Kayla Windsor, at KWins, the number 4. You want to follow her. And I guess she's following you now too, Mark. So she's going to be not only here for 2 hours hearing the best high school football talk on the radio on Saturday mornings, she's also going to get it when we're at games on Friday night or Saturday afternoon or Saturday night. You're going to get inundated with more information than you ever wanted to know about New Hampshire high school football.
I'm not mad. That's why I signed up. That's what I signed up for.
She's like learning more about these people that she has to call up and get to come on the show every single week. Just quickly, we had asked the question. We were talking about that big North Milford matchup last night. That interdivision, or is it's interdivision, right? Division 1 North against Division 3 Milford. Milford won the game 24-21. North did play their guys last night, like we thought Jason Roby would. They had 6 turnovers in that game, and 5 of them were in the second half. So good win for Milford, in my opinion. Not a big boy win, in Mark Thaler's opinion, but Milford, they got a tough road to hoe down the stretch. I mean, their next 3 games, they got Souhegan. The Milford-Souhegan game's always big. That's in Amherst. Then you got Goffstown, Portsmouth, before they finish up the season against Hollis Brookline. So looks like Milford is going to be a playoff team, but I congratulate my friend Darren Root on the coaching staff in Milford with Keith Jones for coming up with a win last night against Nashua North. Portsmouth, impressive victory again last night against Hollis Brookline. Souhegan, as we talked about earlier, kind of spoiling the party for Pembroke as they brought in the lights. Pembroke's a team that is on the rise a little bit. They're known for their basketball program, obviously. Coach Matalosa does a great job there. Spartans are always in the mix. They're going to be another favorite in D2 this year. But the football team's on the rise, and they did. I almost went to that game last night just to see what these portable light type of things are set up. I remember talking to John Doyle last week about when they bring in portable lights, and it's kind of hard to see, and the sound is kind of bothersome, but I want to check out one of those games eventually where they bring in the portable lights. But not much going on this week in terms of marquee matchups, but you will be at that Bedford-Manchester West game. I look forward to reading your stuff in the New Hampshire Union Leader. Check out the show online, the video cast with John Kesty filming it, nhsportspage.com. For Kayla Windsor, our producer, and Mark Thaler, my co-host, I'm Pete Terrier. We'll talk to you next Saturday.